I think one of the things to think about when it comes to premium areas and the growth is that there's no actual finish line.
Yeah.
It's not like, okay, I'm not talking about Balmain quite often because that's where my office is, but it's also a premium suburb. And it's not like, well, Balmain reaches, the $1 million threshold, first, and that's it, stops, and everything else has got to catch up to it. It will continue growing. There'll be ebbs and flows and all the rest of it. If you look at Balmain as an example, why would somebody move to Rozelle rather than Balmain, right? So they're moving further away from the ferry, further away from the water and parks and whatever. Now, Rozelle's got its own lifestyle now. People actually specifically want to go to Rozelle versus Balmain in some cases. And so that's an example of a permanent change that started as a ripple effect. It started that Balmain was where everyone wanted to be. They only went to Rozelle if they couldn't afford to be in Balmain. When the market turned down a bit, they thought, but great, can afford Balmain now, leave Rozelle. But as time goes on, Rozelle gets to be very desirable in its own right. And then people start looking next suburb, Leichhardt. And so then Rozelle's closer to the the top of the pie, and Leichhardt becomes the ripple. And so does Leichhardt have the elements to have permanent growth and to keep that level of appeal? Yeah, and I could actually pull that apart a bit, to be quite honest, about Leichhardt. Leichhardt is still gentrifying. Leichhardt has its Norton Street is a white elephant. Like Leichhardt has loads of potential, but it has failed to reach its potential. Could read like some kid's report card at school. They're talking too much in class. So that's a good example of the ripple effect, and it ebbs and flows. And I've owned property in Leichhardt. I know what happens there. That becomes desirable because it's everything else is priced there. Everybody's priced out of everything else, and then all of a sudden markets move and they go, bugger that, I don't want to be in Leichhardt, I'd rather be in Rozelle, and so then they turn back. So to be permanent, to have a permanent effect or increase in terms of prices in an area that's experienced a ripple effect, it has to be properly gentrified, and it has to have local characteristics that are equally desirable to the areas that people that they've foregone. Is that even a word, foregone? In order to go there.
Yeah.
The thing is, though, that those real premium suburbs and the real next ones down that never quite bridge that gap, they never quite have the elements in play to be a top performer, the gap over time actually gets bigger and bigger. It might be slow and imperceptible, but, Kent talks about it all the time, and he talks about those suburbs along the coast and then the ones on the inland on the other side of a highway. There's always a highway, and the ones close on the right side of the highway close to the coast, the gap of those property prices, the growth, basically they get to a point where they almost decouple. Yeah. And so there's a level of relativity to a point, and then they sort of aren't relative anymore. You can't bridge that gap. So I guess, it's something to watch for. It's watching for when you're making those compromises and going for the next best suburb. Does that next best suburb run the risk of always being the bridesmaid, or can it be a bride in its own right one day?